Hi, everyone. Welcome and good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you're tuning in from. I hear we've got people sort of all over the globe in our meeting today. So, whatever time it is for you, thank you so much for joining us virtually. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's event. We're having a live author reading of new nonfiction. Today, we're going to be hearing from Kalpana Sutaria, author of Cooling Our Environment, an architect's vision for combating global warming, which was released on December 10th, and Vicky Pinpin-Feinstein, author of Beyond Fear and Suspicion, The New Americans in Little Ethiopia, which is releasing May 20th. Both of their books can be purchased from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, the books can be found on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/book. I'm also going to put direct links to both books in the chat for you so you can easily find them on the website. At the end of today's event, I also want to mention that we're going to have time for audience questions. So throughout the readings, if you think of any questions for one or both of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. For the duration of the event, please do stay muted, but feel free to use the chat for praise and comments in addition to questions. One last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. And if you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so you can submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Kalpana and Vicky today. We're going to start off with our first reader, who is Kalpana Sutaria. Kalpana is an architect, an author, and a project manager working for the city of Austin. She has worked on climate responsive buildings and has promoted sustainable guidelines in cities' buildings throughout her career. She has been a volunteer at the Citizens Climate Lobby, which is working to create a political will to transition away from polluting fuels. She believes that green buildings are crucial to cool our environment, but in order to do so, we need policies to lower carbon from all sectors of our economy. She has a master's in architecture from the University of Texas at Austin, is a licensed architect, AIA, in the state of Texas, lead accredited professional, BD plus C, and a project management professional, PMP. In Cooling Our Environment, the book we're going to be hearing her read from today, Kalpana explains how our activities continue to warm the planet. Extreme weather events are on the rise, and heat-related deaths and illnesses are going up. We witness such weather routinely. What shall we do? Personal actions aren't enough, but they are motivators for bigger actions. And for that, we must reach out to our lawmakers for policies that would help us transition toward clean energy research, development, and deployment. Let's focus on thoughtful policies to create a livable world for all. Throughout Kalpana's reading, I'm also going to be screen sharing a few images that she has pulled to illustrate the points she'll be making. So intermittently, I'll be screen sharing. But until then, now I'm so excited to invite Kalpana to unmute and begin her reading for you all.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. And I'm delighted to share my book with you. It so happens that in Austin, Texas, it is more than 100 degrees today, which is way above normal. And it's also an ozone action day. So it illustrates that, yeah. And see here, you can see the global average temperature from 1850 to 2023, and 2023 being one of the hottest years where climate scientists were totally stunned. So as Hela already read about, all our activities continue to warm the planet and extreme weather events are on the rise. So why should we cool our environment? And more importantly, why should we care? We should care because it is for quality of life for us and for our children and grandchildren, and young people you love. They will inherit the planet that we live, and our actions will determine whether they will be able to enjoy natural environment as much as we can. And if we don't take action, they may not be able to. So one of my most vivid memories of the COVID-19 pandemic was seeing the footage of the majestic Himalayan mountains, their peaks visible from great distances for the first time in many years. You may remember your own memories in 2020 when during the COVID-19 lockdown. And it's because the sudden drop in pollution from driving, flying, and all other activities during the lockdown that led to clearer skies and breathtaking views. So, what did we learn? When we reduce the burning of fossil fuels, that is, oil, coal, and gas, the air quality is improved tremendously. Unfortunately, these improvements were short lived, as we know, because we are back to doing all the activities. And so, years of burning fossil fuels have collected tons of pollutants in the atmosphere, and that's not going away unless we and our lawmakers take meaningful actions. And meaningful is very important because actions in intermittent ways are not very effective. Now, lawmakers live among us, and they are also watching adverse impacts on their constituents, the people they serve or they're supposed to serve. In a democratic society like ours, we have a voice. We have many ways to demand policies professionally and personally. It starts with an inner will, and then we can use our voice and take actions to influence them. Young people across the US and the world are energized. They want to bring about change. I'm optimistic that we can restore the environment and create a livable world if we continue to press for the right policies and work with other nations for this global challenge. Now, if you have experienced hot climate of Ahmedabad, India, or any other hot place, you know the debilitating effects of heat day after day after day, especially if you don't have fans and air conditioning. And that was my experience in the childhood home of my grandfather. My adopted hometown of Austin, Texas is also a hot place, but we have air conditioning to help us. Many around the world do not. Buildings are places for comfort and joy to enjoy with our loved ones. Buildings also use a lot of energy, and most of it comes from fossil fuels. So, how do we lower energy use in buildings without jacking up the air conditioners? History has lessons for us. For thousands of years, prior to the Industrial Revolution, our ancestors were able to build structures without electricity and found comfort using climate responsive designs and local building materials. They gained knowledge of the sun, wind, rain, and landscapes. When people had laid out their streets and homes, they had to respond to their climate for physical comfort, but they also created spaces for enrichment of life along with the comfort. The deepest roots of any culture are as immersed in their environment they develop as they are in attitude towards that environment. So my grandfather, he being a Jain, Jainism is a religion some of you may know. He inculcated the value of conservation in his patriarchal family members. The home he built used design features from historic vernacular architecture as well as the modern buildings of the 20th century. And with those experiences, without knowing anything about architecture, I wanted to study architecture, which I did in Ahmedabad and in Austin. Austin has been an early leader in the green building movement and has many LEED certified buildings. Green buildings are crucial and they have helped lower harmful emissions. But Austin's summer seasons keep expanding like the rest of the world. And today, this week is a perfect example where we don't have such temperatures in early May, but it is summer already. Um, so downtown Austin is now full of glass skyscrapers, causing what is called urban heat island effect. And you can see the Austin down skyscrapers from the town lake. So what is urban heat island effect? It is created by tightly packed buildings, a lack of green spaces, and the use of air conditioning for millions of square feet of space in a concentrated area. So in Austin downtown, you can have 5 to 7 degrees higher temperature compared to the surroundings. So with technological innovations, population growth, and high consumption lifestyles, the world's electricity consumption has skyrocketed along with the emissions in all sectors of our economy, including electricity generation, transportation, manufacturing, and agriculture. And you can see this EPA pie chart where you can see the transportation is the largest one, which is why, because we drive, fly, and take trains. That's the largest in the US, and US being a very large country, uses a lot of, has very high emissions by transportation. So how do we expand the skills of our ancestors and the innovations of many bright minds since that time to find comfort in today's buildings by keeping sustainability and climate restoration front and center in the planning and design process? How do users of the building educate themselves to demand designs that lower energy use and reduce pollution? Refrigerants in the air conditioning systems, which play a key role in cooling the buildings, also do warm the environment. So I'm going to tell you this vicious cycle we are in. The use of air conditioning goes up as it gets hotter. Increased heat requires more air conditioning, which uses more electricity generation and more refrigerants that increase emissions that worsen global warming for our planet. So with global warming, we jack up our air conditioning and the cycle continues. And so this is not sustainable if we continue to do that. The only solution then is to address global warming, reduce emissions, and restore our climate. And I strongly believe that we can and we must act. It's really up to us. When extreme weather events hit hard, like Hurricane Harvey or Winter Storm Uri for Texans, we have very little choice at that time to adapt. But to find long-term solutions to the global warming, we need mitigation strategies. A large amount of carbon dioxide is already accumulated in the atmosphere. We continue to add to that and other greenhouse gas pollutants. So Earth systems have ability to absorb some of these emissions, like forests, landscapes, and oceans. But even after they absorb, the emissions keep going up. Like you saw in the global temperature graph, there is an emissions graph very similar. So when we combine, we keep building more and removing green areas. When we combine the innovative talents of so many professionals, we have a huge potential to find innovative ways to plan, design, and construct buildings and infrastructure. Once we focus on policies to do just that, the possibilities are immense. One thing is clear, we cannot have business as usual. So your circle of influence is much larger than you think. I think you are in the center of this whole universe where you can you play a critical role in influencing your community, your city, your nation, and eventually that affects the global uh, actions. So you occupy the buildings after they're designed and constructed. Those designs continue to affect our environment for many years. There is a huge stock of existing buildings that need energy efficiency improvements to lower emissions. You can exercise your vote and demand actions from your lawmakers. It is magical to create something that would fulfill our obligation, but also restore our climate and enhance quality of life for us and for future generations. Most importantly, we can continue to talk to our friends and families about our changing environment. So let's be a part of creating a livable world for all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana. That was such a great way to illustrate these various points that you obviously have all this expertise in and making it understandable and digestible. So thank you so much for that reading for us today.
Thank you.
Of course. Reading next, I'm now excited to introduce Vicky Pinpin-Feinstein. Vicky is a writer, former college lecturer, communications, technology, and society professional, and author of A Thousand Little Deaths, an account of her experience growing up under the Marcos dictatorship in the Philippines. With graduate degrees in the social sciences, her career focused on media and society at various institutions. Then, working with refugees inspired her to write Beyond Fear and Suspicion. She received an Individual Artist and Scholar Award from the Montgomery Arts and Humanities Council. Vicky now lives by her motto that life is a curious mix of a love for organization and randomness. Today, Vicky will be reading from Beyond Fear and Suspicion. What happens when a Filipino immigrant tries to know her Ethiopian neighbors? A journey through the heart of Little Ethiopia in a Washington, D.C. suburb. Beyond Fear and Suspicion, The New Americans in Little Ethiopia braids the stories of former refugees, asylum seekers, students, and diversity visa recipients through forced exits out of their native land, all while still reeling from the traumatic effects of wars, famine, and repressive regimes. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'm so excited to welcome Vicky for her reading.
Thank you so much, Hayla. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Your attendance to this event is, I'm sure, a great support to Kalpana and myself. And thank you, Kalpana, for that reading. I really learned some new things. So I would like to switch the topic now from global warming to something a little bit more back to earth, to humans. Anyway, I will try to read, because this is a pretty long book. I will read passages from the book that will hopefully offer you some flavor about what it is about. The first two that I would read introduces you to a couple of characters. The next one, and there are others, the next one will provide you some idea of what it's like to come here from somewhere else and what that does to your sense of belonging and identity. After that, I will read a passage about a crisis in the story of immigrants and me, but also about a crisis in their homeland. Next to that, I will read a section about traveling to Ethiopia. I will then conclude with a passage after I returned from the trip. I will not read the conclusion, and so hopefully you will look forward to reading the book. So I'll begin. Only 19 years old, Iskander landed in Washington, when the city basked in sunny but mild temperatures, with a lingering winter cold visiting only at night. It was early April 1968. In the skies above, a plane from Addis Ababa carrying the young man was about to land at Washington National Airport. From his window seat, Iskander craned his neck, looked down, and saw buildings, some green trees, and a scattering of brown ones, their leaves having fallen to the earth below. What puzzled him were the swells of billowing packets of black and gray smoke mingling among the clouds. As the plane continued its descent, he gaped at the reddish, yellowish glow of fires. He didn't know where the fires were coming from or why. He didn't know when he arrived at the place that was to be his home for the next 2 months, he turned on the television to watch the news. Tuning in, he learned he arrived on the day an important man in America's history had been killed. A gunman shot the civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. as he stood by his hotel room balcony in Memphis. The news reported street protests mere hours after this happened, and this spread to over 100 places across the country. In DC, African American neighborhoods became horrifying scenes of destruction, looting, fires, mayhem, rampages, while in contrast, the city's wealthy enclaves were untouched. The TV images shocked the first-time visitor to America. The neighborhoods where African Americans had settled since the Great Migration saw crowds smashing shop windows or setting them on fire, leaving destruction and violence in its wake. During 4 tumultuous days, the city saw over 900 businesses destroyed, 2,000 homes lost, 1,200 people injured, and 13 people dead. I couldn't believe what I saw on TV. I wondered if this was happening in America. He looked incredulous, then said, I won't ever forget my first lessons about African Americans and what they endured. I will now read from a former professor. Threats of incarceration and torture silenced those defying the government. Ethiopians knew that the Mekalawi prison in Addis Ababa was the most notorious. Prison staff tortured or even killed those inside its walls. Santayo knew this, and it hung over his head. Each day was unbearable. It was an angst-filled waiting to be arrested. He would never find another teaching position. It was time to leave. Exiting the only home he ever knew and abandoning his family were the actions of a desperate man. Living alone in a modest apartment in the DC area, he found work as a front desk clerk in a motel. Regrets plagued him. Anger consumed him. I once had the respect of my peers. Now everything is no more. It's like I gave up my identity. The government took it away, he said, his voice fading, his desperation plain to see. Despite the dim lights, I saw his face darken. His voice remained flat, but his anger was palpable. His eyes looked haunted. His fat eyebrows drew closer, and his shoulders were stiff. This is about a little girl who came to the US when she was only 7 years old. Layla's view of her confused identity segued easily into other complicated matters. One of these involved the concept of home. For many immigrants, home had become complex and filled with pangs of regret, if not torment. Understanding what home meant to them demanded honesty. Upon leaving Ethiopia, for Daniel and Layla, it meant confronting the contours, boundaries, and dynamics of self and character that began in the old country and which then blended into the new one. Their in-between feelings of alienation, loss of identity, living in loose, unstable cultural terrain were like booby traps that could ensnare them, especially when they least expected it. Perhaps it wasn't completely about home. In America, it was also about race. Today, race remains an important barometer in how Layla sees herself. Same for Daniel. The newly arrived Layla learned its importance as soon as she started school here at 7 years old. From the nap or lack of it on her hair, to white girls not wanting to play with her, the ugly face of race relations unfolded before her much too soon. It didn't matter if she cared about it or not. Seeing university students speaking languages other than English in Berkeley, Daniel saw a side of himself that he kept hidden while growing up. Both siblings had become sensitized to the oscillations of race relations and had been exposed to prejudices and ethnocentrism. Also, as sociologist Robert Park coined the term, Daniel and Layla wore a racial uniform that because of their skin color, they could not go unnoticed in a space dominated by white people. Like a pendulum, racial swings in America depended on the prevailing winds of politics and ethnocultural gravitational pulls that were by turns welcoming or vilifying. I get frustrated, even annoyed when some of my Ethiopian friends refuse to see themselves as African Americans. I do not like that about them. How do they identify themselves? I asked. She swallowed hard and said, Ethiopians, definitely, not African Americans. And you don't agree because? No, I don't. Yes, we are Ethiopians, but we are also African Americans. Tell me more. I think Ethiopians who say they are not African Americans are misguided. I get upset when they say they aren't. We are from Africa, and that makes us Africans, aside from being Ethiopians. But isn't that their choice? Her face was getting flush. Yes, it is. But think about it. We are one of the first Black people in the world. Biologists and historians have studied this. There's no denying we have a distinct culture as Blacks. A stiff stance, then her lip curled. The thing is, these Ethiopians dislike being called African American, and yet it's outrageous that they tick off the African American box every time they complete a government form. She went on to say that her friends should be ashamed of themselves. By ticking off the African American box in these forms, they opened benefits for themselves available only to minorities. That social service they applied for would not have been possible if African Americans and people of color had not worked hard to fight for them. It rankled her that her friends were being dishonest and opportunistic. The powerful aroma of Vietnamese food greeted our nostrils as Chas and I chose a table on the patio off the side of Lotus Cafe. Sweet, sour, salty, and peppery smells suffused the sultry air as food was brought to diners. The strong bouquets of these herbs and spices in the dishes, combined with the muggy weather, felt like everything was sizzling. I thought I was sizzling too. Silver Spring was in the throes of August's steaminess when I returned home from a trip and brought back concerns about traveling to Ethiopia in September. Amir was also back from his visit to Addis Ababa, and Sarah looked refreshed from her holiday in Seattle. We arranged to meet them at their favorite Vietnamese restaurant. We arrived early. Amir and Sarah weren't there yet. Minutes passed. I ran my fingers back and forth across my forehead as I tapped my foot under the table. My stomach muscles were tense. The decision about whether to go to Ethiopia hounded me. When they arrived, I noticed Amir was wearing a faded army green shirt over his charcoal gray slacks. The green color triggered an image of soldiers in combat gear. The situation in Ethiopia was volatile, Amir acknowledged soon after he sat down. Sites of protests were becoming scenes of violence and death. Government leaders were on edge. He provided further details of events he saw in Addis Ababa, but I was desperate to get some reassurance. Is it still safe to go? I asked. I'm not 100% sure. I think it might be okay. He swallowed hard after he said this. I sighed louder than I intended. I believe it's okay for you to go. You'll have a good time, Sarah said. It was Chas's turn to ask. Would you still recommend going, given what Amir said? You're not Ethiopians. The government is only targeting Ethiopians, Sarah replied. We both eyed Amir for his reaction. He looked pensive and turned his gaze at the oak trees lining the street, their leaves unmoving and wilting from the heat. He wrung his hands and was in no hurry to speak. When he did, it was as if he himself couldn't believe what he was about to say. As long as you don't talk to local people, you'll be fine. Wow, did you really mean that? I'm not sure how I could travel to another country without talking to people, I said. Now I'm in Addis. Above all, it was the unrelenting piety that stayed with me. At the St. George's Cathedral in Addis Ababa, supplicants streamed by despite being shut out of the church doors at mid-morning. They knelt on the ground and kissed its exterior walls. Some bent their bodies to graze their lips on the ground. A group hovered around the massive front door in stooped postures, bowing, bending, their hands together in front of their chest, their faces appearing to be under the influence of some hypnotic drug. There, I met a woman who flew from her faraway home to hear Mass and express her devotion to St. Mary. At the Meskel Festival, throngs of devotees awaited the lighting of a huge demera by the Ethiopian Church's patriarch. In the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, worshippers, awash in a sea of white, knelt and bowed their heads or swayed their bodies to the rhythm of the incantations escaping their lips. Through it all, I felt dwarfed by the magnitude of the people's devotion. Piety was everywhere. Did I realize this only because I arrived in time to witness an important festival on the Ethiopian calendar? I couldn't be certain. Yet, as my time in the country passed, I saw people in cities, towns, and villages expressing their religious beliefs I had seen nowhere. The more I observed, the more I couldn't rid myself of an impertinence that their devotion almost bordered on a kind of communal pious delirium. Now, in the land of their birth, I drew my attention to what they might have thought about in challenging me to come here. I decided I would not hasten to ask this question of them, but would simply presume they would leave it up to me. Up to me to experience what the country had to offer, up to me to thread the possible connections between us. There were already a few of these that I discovered. Traditionally, we both ate with our hands and not with chopsticks or silverware. There was also the way we showed similar respect for older people, village elders, and for those who came before us. There was also the inclination in our cultures of origins about not saying no to those who invite or ask us for favors. Finally, there was this thing about how we perceive time. Time was more malleable, not reliant on the precision of hours and minutes, but often adjusted depending on experiences and circumstances. Time was perceived in alignment with the prevailing conditions, whether this may be caused by the changing forces of nature or those imposed by physical or social impediments. Now, setting foot in the place they came from was my chance to review all that they had shared with me and hope to summon these details and memories as I traversed the spaces where they had been. I'm glad you're back and safe, Amir said. I called him and other friends upon returning home. Relief registered in his voice. He also invited me to a sister city meeting and dinner he, Iskander, and others would attend. I could tell everyone about the trip there, he pointed out. I texted Iskander to let him know I was back. He replied, "It will be good to see you and to hear about your trip." An Indian friend working on international development projects in Ethiopia, emailed and wrote, "I cannot wait to chat firsthand about why so, how so, and the seeming contradictions of a place he described as a culture with a long-standing tradition steep in history from pharaonic time leading up to the Old Testament, the Wall, the Rack, and the Kasbah. It's linked to Arabia by the gateway of ancient Harar and once seen as the fourth most religious city for Islam after Mecca. Alas, in Western academia and for the literati, Ethiopia is only a passing footnote at best." My Indian friend was prone to waxing esoteric, but I couldn't totally disavow his description about the land of the Habushes. Few in America, never mind the rest of the world, knew Ethiopia was an ancient civilization. What my Ethiopian friends wanted me to discover there was what kept my focus. They might not have agreed with my friend's description of their homeland as a passing footnote, that their lives could not be relegated to a footnote. Despite the persistent perils, sudden misfortunes, broken dreams, and disrupted lives, Ethiopians managed to preserve their pride and identity. They added being American to the latter, even as their traditions, history, and sense of belonging as Ethiopians pulsated within them. These sentiments never left them, despite their living in the secular, post industrial, information saturated 21st century America. Yes, they had learned to be Americans too. In contrast, I wondered if native born Americans have even any idea of the transformative journeys these immigrants had taken. In the end, what was clear to me was how Ethiopians hid in plain sight amongst native born Americans. That's it. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vicky, especially for kind of painting these pictures and jumping between these conversations and direct interactions. I think that really helps bring a narrative like this not only to life, but makes it so relevant to the reader and feel so real, which of course is the key here. So thank you so much for that reading.
You're
At this
welcome. Thank
time,
you.
of course, of course. At this time, we do have time for our audience Q&A. So if you have a question for one or both of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I will make sure they get asked. We do already have some questions coming in. So this first one is for Kalpana. Please share a recent workday or successful work project that particularly encouraged you.
Sorry, I unmute. So yeah, hi Emily. It's so nice to see you. She's one of the Citizens Climate Lobby members who is now in Alabama, right, Emily? And so, right. So the recent, there are two things about the recent, projects. One is lobbying at the Texas state capitol. It is so amazing and sometimes very disturbing to see how our lawmakers at the Texas state capitol are trying their best to, some of them, trying their best to hinder the progress towards clean energy. Texas is a leader in solar and wind energy production. And if, we have ERCOT app, and just yesterday I saw that 60% of the energy had come from clean energy sources. And clearly, I think the oil and gas industry is threatened by that, whatever it is. But even our ERCOT, which supplies the energy, is completely disturbed by the fact that some of the bills would stop progress towards clean energy, production of solar and wind energy. And so our group, CCL, we dropped postcards, we went there, we wrote letters, we lined up there, and we are trying to save some of the bills, which we still don't know. But hopefully our work will help, to keep those bills, not adopted by the House and Senate, so that we can continue to remain the leader in clean energy production. And a second one is my project called with the City of Austin, which is Dove Springs Public Health Center. And this part of Austin is one of the poorest part, and they have hardly any, until I finished that project, they did not have access to public health facilities. And this is a group of people. Their poverty rate was like 26%, which is much higher. But even those who are not, in poverty level, they also use the public health services like immunization, WIC, which is Women, Infant, Children facilities. They asked for it from our city for 30 years almost. And so finally that center is built, and that makes me very happy to see people being able to walk to those facilities and get the public health services, especially immunization, food, and the WIC programs. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that in-depth answer. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say it's relieving to hear that there are wins happening in your line of work. So that's really a wonderful thing to be able to hear about. This next question is for Vicky. Actually, a couple related questions. How did you come to meet this group of Ethiopians and gain their trust? And also, please share how you conducted your research for the book, particularly with respect to gaining that trust. Some of whom, those people that you've interviewed might have been under political threat. Especially, this must have been quite challenging.
Thank you for that question. It actually was. In fact, it took me longer than I expected. And the way this came about, and the reason I chose Ethiopian immigrants was, and you will find that in the introduction to the book, is I had been living in Sydney, Australia, and I worked for refugees at one point when we lived there. When we came back to the DC area, all of a sudden I saw this whole Little Ethiopia not far from where I live. And so I had vowed to myself that I was going to write about displaced people as my next writing project. And lo and behold, it came sooner than I wanted when I saw that there was a Little Ethiopia here. They used to be more in the Washington, D.C. itself, but now they were, because of high rents and stuff, they were pushed out into the suburbs. And so I spent several weeks just learning everything I could about Ethiopians, because the only thing I knew about them at that point was back in the 80s when I was a graduate student. And we had done a fundraising for famine victims in the 1980s when the country was undergoing a very severe famine. And so it took me a while to find people, because the title of the book is Beyond Fear and Suspicion, but actually that suspicion was actually to me. I had spent months and months being in Little Ethiopia, and people would come that I had would approach and say, "I'm interested in talking to you," and they would either say they don't speak English, or they would like just go like this and I'm like, "Who are you? Why would you want to know about us?" And they were very suspicious of me. They didn't know who I was and why are you be interested in us? You look the way you do. You don't even look white. Why would you want to tell stories about us? And so it was months of this, and people would say, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll meet you there." And then when I go there at the appointed time and place, they wouldn't show up. So this kept happening to me until finally the headway the breakthrough I got was there was this man who I found out was the leader of the community, and I spoke with him through another acquaintance that I met, and I explained to him what I wanted. And then he says, "Don't worry, I'll put you in touch with other people." And so that began like a little circle. And then that little circle got me to other members of the community. Like I spent, for example, a summer with when I met the nonprofit director of a community organization that provides English lessons to these new immigrants. So I spent a summer sitting in them learning English. So there was kind of like a back way, because in fact there's a chapter in the book where I asked this guy, and by the way, all of the names in the book are not their real names because of what's happening in their country at the time and still does. I had changed all their names, and I told them that I was going to change all their names. And so that was it was difficult, but I knew once I got these people who are the major characters in the book to say, "Don't worry, we'll help you in whatever way we can." But at the same time, they also issued a challenge to me, which is that you cannot write a book about us without going to the place where we came from. So so I had already planned on going to Ethiopia, but yeah, I had to cancel it 2 times because of a civil war that happened, you know, and all of these things that people were very afraid of. And at some point they told me, if something bad happened to you, if you don't cancel your trip, we'll never be able to forgive ourselves. So that's when I knew I had a breakthrough, that these people were now become my friends.
Yeah, I can only imagine the lengths you have to sort of go through and the commitment you have to make to the work in order to reach that level with so many different individuals. So I think that's a real testament to the dedication that went into the book, but of course also your character, Vicky. And thank you for kind of walking us through that process.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. This next question is another one for Kalpana. How did you approach the challenge of breaking down the contents of your book into language that's approachable for non-experts to read?
Yes, and that was very challenging. I, I mean, the title says that it is, an architect's vision, but really it's a vision to address global warming. And therefore, it was written such that people who are worried about their environment, those who are concerned about their environment, would find readable. I was trying my best to not make it technical, so technical that, in fact, some of my architect friends told me that it is still technical for them. But I have tried my best, and I have to tell you this story. My daughter-in-law's father, who is in India, he told me he's 84, and he says that no way I'm going to read something this complicated. So I told him that, please try, I'm making you, appealing you to try and read. And he did, and he wrote to me that he really, it was written in a simple language that people can relate to, because I'm really trying to reach common people, because every one of us can take actions. We don't have to be architects and designers. We live in buildings and we use buildings, and we have a lot to offer to address this issue. And so I had that in mind as by one of my audiences. And after hearing from some people, I felt like it is written in a language that most people can relate to. So,
Yeah, I can imagine, there's only so far you can kind of simplify a language without losing the meaning, right? But I think it's a good litmus test that you're already hearing from people that it's really understandable. So that's a relief to hear, and I think just makes it an even more exciting endeavor to take up that reading.
thank you.
This next question is another one for Vicky. Did anything surprise you along your research process?
You're muted, Vicky.
Okay, so did anything, sorry, I was trying to do something else. Yes, actually there was. I had always thought that this was going to be relatively easy, given the fact that I myself is an immigrant to this country. And as you know, in recent times, in recent months, we may be an endangered species. And so, but I was shocked in the beginning and surprised that these people really treated me the way they did, that they were very suspicious of me. I thought that we were in the immigrants club, social club, and that I would be, but I was so naive in thinking that they would be friendly with me and all of that, but that didn't happen. But later on, I realized that the shock was actually unfounded, because if you know the history of their country, fear and suspicion was at the top of their, they have gone through different regimes that are repressive, dictatorial. During the communist period, was very bloody and violent, and it hasn't really changed very much even after the communists had left. So in that way, that wasn't surprising. But what was really at first was, I thought that I was a person of color, and they were too. That we were both immigrants, and that we were going to get along just fine, and that didn't happen. So that was surprising.
Yeah, I can imagine that's kind of an awakening that you have to contend with and regroup as that sort of happens. Another question, this is for Vicky, but actually I'd love to hear from both of you. What work inspired you to write this book of yours? Vicky, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yes, there were a lot of works that definitely inspired me. The one that really was kind of like right by my bedside all the time was I'm a very big fan of Tracy Kidder, and he has a book called Hometown, and it's not one word; it's two words, and it's about a town in Massachusetts. And his style of writing, and that which is narrative nonfiction, or what we call creative nonfiction too, was a very, very big inspiration for me. The other biggest inspiration for me was a book that was written over 100 years ago, which is How the Other Half Lives. And this was a story of how a Danish immigrant who became a newspaperman, Jacob Rees, had gone through the tenements of New York and found people, immigrants from different parts of the world. And so that was a very seminal in his field at the time. But for me, it was something that I kind of look up to, even though his style of writing right now in this day and age, you would probably consider kind of not acceptable because for several reasons that I won't go into. But those two, any writing that are by narrative nonfiction were always a big inspiration as I went through this, and so that's mine. short answer.
Yeah, I know that there's such a variety of creative nonfiction, so I'm sure there's a wealth of helpful, I mean, writing and style and all these different types of inspiration to pull from that. So exciting things to be able to add to the reading list. And Kalpana, what about you? What works inspired you for this book?
So I never forgot the experience I had in my grandfather's house. I have this entire chapter in the book called "A Child," my childhood home, and so it has many things besides the fact that how difficult it was to find comfort without fans and air conditioners. And I have strong connections back home. I visit them often because my brothers are there. And I see people who cannot really afford to have even fans, what they go through. And throughout my career as an architect and practicing, working with the city, I have emphasized climate responsive buildings and sustainable practices. But I feel that we have to do more. And you read that earlier, that we have to have policies. We have to reach out to our lawmakers to change that. Otherwise, the progress is very slow, and architects stay in their own, design world where you can create very pretty buildings, but you can forget this aspect that we need to make them comfortable. We need to worry about global warming. And so I saw Al Gore's documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, and I also read the book called Storms of My Grandchildren by Dr. James Henson, a climate scientist. So those two really affected me. And for 10, 12 years, I was thinking, how do I put this so that architects and other people can see how, what we should do? Something, describe the problem and actions that we should take. And it's the COVID times which gave me, a lot of time to kind of concentrate. And that's when I started writing the book. So it's like my passion for the whole life. So,
Well, I'm so glad to hear that it's been able to come to fruition like this. At this point, that is all the questions we have time for today, but I just want to say to both of our authors, thank you so much for not only writing these books, but also being here on this event with everybody, sharing the words from your book, but also your thoughts and your expertise with your processes. It's always wonderful to hear books come to life in the voices of their creators. So, to Kalpana and Vicky, thank you so much for doing this event for us. And to everybody in the audience as well, thank you for joining and helping us celebrate these authors together. Don't forget, of course, that you can order Cooling Our Environment and Beyond Fear and Suspicion from the links in the chat. I'm going to put those in the chat one more time for everybody so they're easily accessible. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com, where you can browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. We look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's all for today. So have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you,
thank you, Nate
everyone, for joining us.
and Emily and
I
both
do want to
Emilys.
say thank you to all those who attended, but also that there was a question that was raised about where to buy our books aside from Amazon, because I know that some people are not buying from Amazon. I just want to say that it is available with other booksellers. I think Hala can tell us a little bit more about that. But if you are not wanting to be part of Amazon right now, I completely understand, but it is available with other booksellers. Thank you.
Yeah, I put some links a little higher in the chat to Bookshop, but you can also buy both books from Barnes and Noble. So there are various options for purchasing the books. And if you're independent, your local independent bookstore isn't currently carrying the book, they should be able to place an order for you. So you can also support your independent bookstores that way as well. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Vicky, because I'm always in favor of supporting these alternative bookstore options.
Same for me. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. All right. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.